Hello, everybody. Thanks so much for your patience. My name is there in front of you, Imran Garda. Looking forward to a really insightful and dynamic discussion with three of our guests today as we discuss playing with fire, media, populism, and the threat to democracy. Before we begin, we have a very short video to play for you all. Okay, so this is a big nebulous topic, and it can mean many different things to many different people. And I guess it depends on what angle you're looking at it from. I'm glad today that we have different perspectives. In terms of within borders or a nationalistic sense, we have perspectives that come from a French angle, from a Turkish angle, from a Polish angle, and we can try to look at the similarities and the differences between these different opinions and viewpoints, but also try to see if there's, in essence, a central problem that needs to be solved worldwide, where populism, media, and the erosion of democracy are working hand in hand or hand in glove to the detriment of everybody else. So with us on our panel today, as you can see to my left, we have François Bourgat, we have Bora Bayraktar, and we have Slavomir Serakovsky. The state of play over the next hour is going to be that each person will answer the question if whether they think there is actually a problem, and if there is a problem, what is the problem, and what is the dynamic of the problem and the nature of the problem. They'll each come at it from a different perspective, which is what we're looking forward to. And beyond that, I hope that we can have this really good interactive discussion among all of us as we tease out this issue. We're not going to solve the issue of populism. We're not going to solve the issue of democracy or the challenge to democracy. And we're not going to solve the issue of the problems in the media, of which there are many. As somebody who works in media, I can tell you, it's a mess globally right now. So looking forward to this, and hope you all will enjoy this unfolding process as we go along. So I want to begin with the man to my left, François Bourgat, and I want to ask, what is the issue, what is the heart of the issue to you when you look at populism, media, and democracy? Do you actually believe that populists are using media to threaten democracy?
Thank you so much, Imran. Thank you as well to TRT Forum for allowing me to meet you today. I will give you what I consider a very simple answer to your question. What is populism? What is the landmark which allows us to, when we move beyond, say, hey, we are in an atmosphere of populism? Discredit academic knowledge, discredit professional media, try and move around. Science is no longer science. I know better. Why? Because I'm out of the system. I know better because I am away, a part of those who professionally have the right to speak. Now let me give you a French example of state populism, because sometimes populism rises to the extent that, you know, the US experience, you know, the Brazilian experience. Okay, in the battle of the debate in France between, tendencies of the political sphere, there was a new concept which appeared 2 or 3 years ago. It is, in French, islamo-gauchiste. It means Islamo-leftist. This was created in 2006 by a pro-Israel activist who wanted to discredit the tiny fringe of the French intellectual who supported Palestinian resistance in the frame of the NEM war in Gaza. So those who criticized Israel in this atmosphere were considered the friends of the Islamic terrorist. So they were the friends of Islam, they were the leftist friends of Islam. So they became the Islamo-gauchist. And of course, this concept is not a concept. It's a category to discredit in a debate. It has no scientific base. Nevertheless, in France, a couple of years ago, the Minister of Higher Education asked to CNRS, the structure to which I belong, a National Center for Scientific Research, and asked the boss of all universities, I want an inquiry, I want a report on Islamo-gauchism. The answer of the academic institution was extraordinarily clear. They said, no way. We shall not respond to such an answer, because this answer starts from an angle which is not scientific, and we are scientific. So this is the perfect expression, in my understanding, of what populism is, when you discredit all structure of knowledge and information. And maybe later on we shall move to the specificity of the French situation when it comes to media, and I will document this angle. Thank you so much.
Before I bring in our next speaker, do you agree and accept that sometimes the academics and the media and the professionals deserve to be discredited?
Yes, of course, there is a debate. I have answered this question so many times. I said, colonialism has been supported by a huge compartment of academic sphere in France. So yes, indeed, there is a debate inside the academy. But when we go into the field of populism, it's a wider attitude, which is, see, the discourse of Trump is absolutely
sure,
perfect.
but if somebody says, I'm sorry, but it's not the duty of the French nation to go into Mali and expand our culture and expand our ideas, and even though the academics say it and the professional industry says it, and even though it's built into a cultural outlook, are they populist or are they just speaking the truth?
No, there is a debate inside the academy. What I am addressing, it's an issue where there is a discourse which says any source of knowledge which comes from academy is not to be considered. And
okay,
that's different, believe
no,
me.
I'm glad we separated that out then. Okay, now, this panel is called Playing with Fire. Now, I don't think anything defines playing with fire more than being a moderator and having to have your boss on a panel here. So, I'm playing with fire here. Let me just ask Bora Bayraktar, if I ask you tough questions, am I getting fired? Or?
Of course not.
Of course not.
I had my boss in the past.
Yeah.
He was a great journalist in Turkey, and he used to say, until you bring your guest in front of you, he's the boss. But once you sit in front of you, then you are the boss.
These are my witnesses. These are my witnesses. See, the test of media freedom in Turkey. Yeah, you have it right here.
Yeah.
Okay, so, thank you very much. Bora Bayraktar, what is the problem? What is the essence of the problem in the way you see it? Populists, media, democracy, the convergence of all of these.
I think the problem is a problem of management, because all the things that we are living in, we are living the vision of late World War II. After the World War II, a system was established. The threats were clear, and it was after German Nazi movement, war against all European countries. So the idea was to suppress nationalism, and the tools were different. The state structure was strong everywhere. There was only one, we call it free media, whatever, but there was mainstream papers, televisions, etc. So everything was done by professionals. But I think now we are living in age of radicalism and extremism. We see something. We see things that we couldn't imagine, like terror attacks in Paris, in the 9/11 New York attacks. So I'm teaching, I have some students here, I'm teaching Middle East at the university, and I show them 1970 Dawson's airfield incident. I don't know if you remember. 4 planes were hijacked by Palestinians. They forced them to land in Jordan, but they treated passengers very nicely. They didn't kill anyone. They only destroyed planes. So that was the idea and mentality. Now we witness unthinkable things. Imagine the propaganda of ISIS, how they executed people, planes hitting big constructions. So these things, I think, puts us in a situation which cannot be managed by the mentality of 1940s and 50s. So politics, current system cannot address questions. They cannot provide solutions. That's why we have this far right, especially in Europe. The real problem, I think, anti-immigration, economy, the things that we have seen after post-COVID era. So multiculturalism, many people deny it. Failure of the European Union. We remember during COVID-19, people burned EU flags in France, in Italy, in different places. So I think there is frustration among people. So everybody has their own problem. And I think these are not being addressed by mainstream political parties because they are part of the system. So outsiders who are not in the system, they are providing their solutions. I think this is the real problem. Where media is in this equation, I think media is the battlefield. So there was rules of the game in the past about media, but now we have different media outlets, Facebook, social media, websites, news websites, etc. They have not been regulated so far. So the rules of the game is not clear. So there's kind of anarchy in that sense. So I think because of this, it is the battlefield. Where democracy comes in it, so if we talk about regulating the system of media, then we refer to an upper authority, which as journalists we don't like it, but I think this is the problem. I don't know if I was clear enough.
Yeah, and I think it's something that we're struggling to define as we go along. Yuval Noah Harari, the philosopher and historian, talks about, in his opinion, at the beginning of the 20th century, you had liberalism, communism, fascism, and then after World War II, you had fascism knocked out, and then after the end of the Cold War, you had communism essentially knocked out, and then people believing that liberalism is just ultimately the way forward for the world, reflected in the media, reflected in systems of governance. Maybe other movements, like in terms of the region, say Iranian Revolution took some parts of communism and other things, maybe the Baathists took some fascism, and so you still had liberalism as the central thesis, but then in the past few years, even liberalism's gone now, right? Yeah. So everybody's trying to figure out what are we doing? Yeah. We're just trying to keep our heads above water. And before I go to Slavomir, just this idea with you in a position of leadership within media, especially as a state broadcaster in a country that doesn't align to any one of these sort of, old or new ideologies, is it a process of just trying to demystify things as you're moving forward?
I mean, I think public media is something else. It's different. I think it's more related to the economy of the media, because making news is expensive, so nobody makes money out of it. That's why I think this news business is moving to public organizations. We see Russians, BBC broadcasting, Deutsche Welle, Germans, everybody is building their own every country actually trying to build their own public networks, because private sector cannot fight or compete with the digital media, which is cheaper, and they don't have the similar rules. They don't feel themselves bound with the rules. So I think this is something else, maybe out of the question.
Yeah, and we'll touch upon that a bit more later on, maybe go a bit deeper. Slavomir, when we look at this, you've heard now from Francois and from Bora Bayraktar as well. Are they onto something? Do you agree with what preceded you?
So you started with an anecdote. Let me start with an anecdote, like a brand new anecdote, because Mr. Bora Bayraktar, when we were introducing ourselves to each other, I said, "Oh, so you are from the Bayraktar family, so you deal with the drones." And Mr. Bayraktar
He's my boss, he deals with nuclear weapons.
I know. And Bora Bayraktar said, no worries, I'm a peaceful Bayraktar. So then I said, like, oh, so I represent here Bayraktar with the drones. I'm not a peaceful one. Why? Because I collected money in Poland for Bayraktar for Ukraine, which was about 5 million euros. And Bayraktar family decided to donate it for free. We are still waiting on that it will be realized. And the money can go for humanitarian aid, that means like it's about 10 million euros for Ukraine, and it was collected by more than 200,000 Poles. So I said to Haluk Bayraktar that, listen, I'm not sure whether you can be a president of Turkey, but if you want to run in the presidential election in Poland, it shouldn't be an issue today. So this name Bayraktar in Poland is like very, very, very famous one. So this was an anecdote, and now I would say, and you said that we cannot solve this problem of populism, and of course I know what you mean. It's like very hard and many definitions, etc. But like theoretically, I would say that it's pretty clear what is populism, but it's clear as long as we are putting it in the context of liberal democracy, and I would say that the populism is the antonym. So like so like by definition, it's something that works against liberalism, not necessarily democracy. It's because populists know how to win elections, and they're okay with democracy. The problem is that what they are fighting for and what they hate at most as control freaks are the independent institutions. And if you look at the tradition of liberalism, starting with Montesquieu, Rousseau, John Locke, John Stuart Mill, and others, liberalism means independent institutions or checks and balances. That means like separation of power that usually you have in every liberal democratic constitutions. That means like, judiciary power, legislation power and government are like separated and equal. Usually people forget about this equality. Judges are equal to the ministers in their own field when they're legitimate. And then independent, like civil society, so non-governmental organizations, NGOs, they are independent and they have their own way to control government. Of course, media and public media including are also to control government and to control they are so-called fourth power, usually. And not by chance, not by accident. This is what the liberalism says. Of course, independent judiciary, which is usually the first thing that populists attack once they become in charge. They usually paralyze constitutional court, because if you do it, then the constitution doesn't work. Then you can pass any law you can get, because constitutional court has one rule. Is to control whether the law that was passed by the parliamentary majority is legitimate according to constitution or breaks constitution. If you control constitutional court, you can pass the law that tomorrow will be very good weather, or whatever you prefer.
Can I come in here for a second? Just, you said populists know how to win elections and know how to do democracy. By extension, are populists really good at gaming the media, particularly in the age of social media, in the age of putting out messages that divide people, that create tribalism, where algorithms are putting people in echo chambers and so on? In the world that we're living in right now, are populists doing this thing better than anybody else in order to push out messages, whether on behalf of a state or some private sugar daddy who owns their own media? Are they doing this well, and is that a big problem?
As long as they are doing it in media that are free, pluralistic, and the media that they run, they can say whatever they want. It's a question of freedom of speech. We cannot say, hey, you are populism, you are telling lies, you're stupid, it's just complete mess, what you talk about. This is why we will ban it. No, it wouldn't be okay. But if they are captivating public media, and then they expel anybody who disagrees with them, that means that even democracy is endangered. Because if you control public media, that means you control huge asset and usually huge part of public sphere. And it is financed by the governmental money. Okay, that means that elections became questionable because liberal democracy, I mean, you can imagine illiberal democracy. So everything depends on the political culture. If Hungarians want to have illiberal democracy, then it's fine. Then, like, if majority accepts it, and this is the system they are choosing, then you can have different rules, and elections can be free, and elections are free in Hungary. But if liberalism is not the second pillar of their system, then elections sooner or later will be unfair. And unfair elections means that one side gets more money because one side, instead of their own budget that usually state distributed among parties, they have additional budget that means resources of the state.
Right.
So their party budget is the state budget, okay? If they control public media, that means they have much bigger share of media landscape. And again, that means that their candidates are much more promoted. But as I said, we have different political cultures. The Poles decided in 1989 that they prefer liberal democracy because they were so scared and they had so bad experiences with communism. But you have different countries with different religions, with different cultural background, and when and like if by example, if your country is more like, I don't know, religious than others, or is more conservative, or just for any other reason chooses liberal, like not same as Western, purely Western or American political system, then it's fine. Then I see no problem with having a little bit different distribution of institutions or construction of institutions. So this is fine. I mean, but it's a question of what society wants as pre-definition of democracy.
And again, who gets to decide what the society wants if you don't have a democracy? So this is
but it's a dynamic.
How do we know what they want?
Yeah, of course, but it's a dynamic that is only practically you can define it. Like, I mean, of course, like, but you can more or less know whether what's the difference between I don't know, United States and Turkey.
Yeah, there's something under the surface that you can
France
feel.
is a like country.
Yeah.
In France, it's a huge and extremely important value that the religion is not present in public.
Right.
In Turkey, probably
Yeah.
it's the opposite.
Okay, so I mean, fair enough. I mean, there are cultural dynamics that could be deemed a bedrock of a society, and that influences what comes after that. And since Francois mentioned, Francois, what do you make of this? I mean, we're trying to answer what the problem is, and we come up with more problems as we go along, right? And I want to bring it back to the media particularly, because there's a saying that's attributed to George Orwell, where he says that journalism is saying or publishing what people or the powerful don't want you to publish. Everything else is public relations, right? So whether from private institutions, state institutions, print, digital, whatever, is that definition still workable these days? And ultimately, are we just seeing different populists and power systems just trying to use media as a weapon to achieve their own goals?
Thank you. Allow me to give you two different levels of answer. First, let me stress why the battle is unequal against populism. Because the populist discourse addresses the guts at the time when anti-populist discourse addresses the brain. It's not so easy. They make an omelette. They break the eggs at the time we lay the eggs.
Who are we?
It's much more difficult. Those who oppose this cheap discourse, it's much more difficult and probably painful. It's a lot of difference. And the other reason, let's also put it this way. They break the bridges between belongings. We tried and build them. It's easier to break a bridge than to build it. Now there is another very specific reason, which is at least part of the answer in the situation in France. In France, we have an economic situation of the media, which is not unique, but 9 persons in France, 9 billionaires, control 90% of the written press. 90%. And they control over 50% of TV and radio media. So that's one economic layer of the explanation, which is very important. And this is the reason why the battle is unequal, since, as I started mentioning, this populist way of addressing politics had been instrumentalized in the limits of far-right, right, of compartments of the political scene in France. Since 2018, we are entitled to say that this populist way of making politics has become the mean of action of the state.
Why since 2018?
Well, since 2018 is when President Macron, after he has faced the Gilets jaunes, the yellow revolt realizes that he will no longer be re-elected by the center-left. He has to mobilize the right and the far right. And he will cynically shift his discourse, and we take a borderline of a discourse in the little small city of Les Mureaux in France. In Les Mureaux, in 2020, he will adopt the rhetoric of the populist right wing. And I wrap this up in one sentence. I say, we in France, we used to repress, we used to criminalize actions of a minority of Muslims, actions of a minority of Muslims, considered radicals. Starting 2020, we have started criminalizing and repressing, not the actions, but the opinions, not of the minority, but the majority of Muslims in our country.
Just tell me very briefly how this works if we're not talking about Macron mobilizing the state media as such. I mean, or maybe you are, but what about those 9 billionaires and all the newspapers and stuff? They're private, they're independent, aren't they? So how does it get how does this filter into the discourse if it's not somebody giving an order for things to be done that way?
We have really clear examples of the pressure which has been put on the private media. Google this name of Bollore, this person who owns a right-wing channel. He has been opposing, a book editing by someone. He is refused because he is controlling the publisher. But in the public sphere, I hate to take personal examples, but allow me to take one personal example. The main state channel when it comes to radio, France Inter. I was allowed to speak like 6 minutes about a couple of years ago on the reasons between radicalism in the public sphere of some Muslims. And the head, like if we compare, my neighbor, he interfered immediately to condemn the fact that I have been allowed to speak on the public radio. And she said a very specific sentence. She said, none of what he has said is to be condemned, but it's a matter of principle.
But she didn't stop you, did she?
Well, she didn't stop me because
she gave her opinion.
But I have never, again, been invited on the public radio since.
So you were sort of blackballed from public radio?
Oh, yes, and I'm not the only one. Many people.
So it's not just about throwing someone into jail or...
No. It's preventing access to the public sphere of media.
Bora Bayraktar, pressure. Tell me how pressure gets factored in where there might not be a law to say this or not say this, but in this whole ecosystem that we're talking about of pressures to push an agenda or not push an agenda, how do we actually create free media? How do we create quality media that informs people, leaves them better informed so that they can make their decisions in a democracy?
I think now we have a better chance of having informing people. We have more tools for that, because why do we have so many different news networks, televisions, papers, hundreds of them we have? Why? Because there are different interest groups and there are different expectations and different editorial perspectives. So we all know that, for example, it is difficult to talk about Palestinians' problems in, let's say, in Israel or in the U.S. media. You have to define, for example, some groups as such. I mean, this is how it is. I mean, it's up to the network to make its decisions. But the thing is, now these big mainstream organizations, even the public ones, you cannot impose your own agenda, and it will not be the only agenda in the country. For example, Turkey has been criticized of press freedom many times, but if you look at the media environment, you have lots of opposition media networks. They criticize government every day, very harshly, if you can see. So there are options for the people. So if you don't like one, you can go and search the other. You can look for other agendas, and you can have a full picture of what's going on in the world or in the country. So I think because of these new tools, I mean social media, news websites, I think people can reach more information, but the key point here is professionalism. The problem, I think, the fake news, conspiracy theories, that kinds of sources are poisoning the media environment. So if whatever the network, everybody will work according to their editorial agenda and etc. But if they work good job as journalists, I mean, if they report based on the facts and other stuff, then we can reach full picture. So I think Of course, there are problems. Of course, especially this far-right media in Europe, they are accused of manipulating everything, defaming the politicians and etc. But still, you can check the reality. You can get information from professionally good quality networks.
But that is hard work. You're going into, okay, there's a supermarket of media essentially, right?
Yeah.
And you have to know exactly which aisle to go to for what. You want your vegetables, you go to a certain place.
Yeah.
You want your chocolates, you go to a certain place. Your fresh produce, your meat, and so on, right? Not everybody can do that. I mean, what I think you're saying is that there's no one place that you can go to, right? In the past, maybe.
I don't think in the past either, because in the past you had big mainstream,
Right.
great brands, and they were dominating their agenda. Now there are alternatives. I think we are in better shape right now.
It's interesting though, because doesn't that create a sense of noise and confusion as well? So, for example, nobody's really rushing to be the
This
first.
is what democracy is.
That's true.
Yeah.
No, democracy is chaos, right? Yeah, I mean, nobody's really rushing to be the first anymore in many ways because somebody on Twitter probably reported it first, right?
Yeah.
But you're looking for your angle,
Yeah.
how to differentiate yourself, how to appeal to your market. But then isn't everybody just appealing to their little tribes, which if you have populists
But the thing
in
is-
the tribes, they're just amplifying one perspective, and the ordinary person has to go out there and there's just this mess, and they have to figure out how do I cherry pick all these bits of information
but the
for
thing is,
truth.
people now can put pressure on big networks. Remember the case of Shirin Akila, when she was killed she's Al Jazeera reporter. She was killed by Israeli soldiers while cameras were rolling. So maybe it wouldn't be on the American media if we didn't have the video circulated all around. Remember, New York Times, they said Shirin Akila died in Israel, kind of report they did. So after the pressure, they have to correct it, and they said she was killed. So networks, we are working for TR. We also feel if we don't cover something, that we will have this pressure. Why you are not doing this? Why you are doing this, not doing this? So we always feel that. I think this is in the past we didn't have that.
So the multiplicity of voices has added to democracy because it gives people more choice and more
Yes.
availability of information.
And they limit big networks to avoid covering some certain issues.
Right.
They can still do that, but now there's pressure. I think that this is good.
It's good. However, let me go to Slavomir here. This is not just my opinion, but polls have shown, the Reuters Institute did a bunch of polls over the past 5 years. They show that trust in media worldwide is as low as it's ever been. People don't trust media. People are more likely to trust their uncle's crazy WhatsApp or Facebook post than something they read in the media. So we're doing all this work to counter disinformation, to counter fake news, to try and create alternatives. And I mean, I've been in conversations where somebody shared something with me on WhatsApp and I say, no, I was there. Like, this didn't happen. I was there. And the person says, well, you're so close-minded, man. This thing is unsourced, it's unverified, but people believe it. So how do is this a losing battle, Slavomir, given that people have no trust in media? The fact that we got to this place right now, they're still more likely to be swayed by unverified information, by noise.
It's a philosophical question, and I'll explain why. 100 years ago, the question of truth was unquestionable. People were believing that the reality can be either true or not true. And then, came something that kind of a breakthrough in modern philosophy first, but then in the mindset of people. When Nietzsche said God is dead, he meant that there is no clear sanction when you're saying that something is truth. There is nothing that is making one view obviously true than the other view. Okay, I'm starting with the kind of a philosophy because then, philosophy usually mirrors what is going on in the culture. Now it's very hard to justify that one point of view. Well, when it comes to the very simple things, that like we are 4 persons here, it's easy. But when you want to say something a little bit more complicated, that we are like 4, let's say, professional speakers, then you can discuss it, okay? You can say, I was there, I saw them, they have like biographies, and they are experienced enough to legitimately say something important about media. But this is very hard to distinguish that this is much more true than somebody that sits here in the public and can say, well, I saw their biographies, 2 of these guys had a huge problem with to prove that they are experienced enough to legitimately tell you something that is really serious, etc., etc. And then starts the big discussion, in media. Then you can say, well, this is a fake news, and I'm gonna say, no, it's a fake news, and then tell me who is right. And this is what happened with the world. Like, let's say when the postmodernism became something as the most, the fundament, the foundation of the way how the mindset of Western world at least thinks. Okay, so here we will have always a problem. Even the word fact, from Latin, fact comes from the Latin verb fatio, facere, feci factum. That means, facere means to construct. So the fact is a social construction, I mean, of course, if majority people thinks that this was a fact, then the sanction comes from this majority. But there is nothing that will prove you for 100% that this is fact and this is not fact. And this is why we have such a big problem with fighting with this question of, like, as another philosopher said, anything goes. Okay, so let's be clear about this. We will not avoid this issue of like what is fake news, what is not fake news. This is why Trump was so successful in saying like this is fake. It's very hard to defend against this argument. The only thing we can say is that we can win this battle. The more people will believe that Trump is populist, then this is why he will, by a stereotype, be perceived as populist. But there is nothing essential in Trump. I'm an antagonist of Trump, but there is nothing essential that makes clearly Trump a populist and not Macron. Or like that, Kaczynski is by any definition a populist, the guy who is the leader of Polish majority. But even Donald Tusk, his clearest adversary, you can prove that many things that he was doing, the way he was thinking, and Macron is a I would say continuation of the same philosophy. Macron was saying there is no left and right. Macron was transferring politicians from both left and right. Okay, this was kind of a populist move. Okay, this was a kind of an eclectic thing. This was like to say, people, listen, I'm not particular. I represent everybody. And he was even saying, I'm not from party politics, all right? I'm from the regular people. And this was populist move, okay? And who will tell you clearly that Trump is a populist, not Macron, okay? And if you say both guys are populist, but Macron is soft populist, Trump is hardcore populist, it's a question of discussion, okay? And now let me tell you something. I'm a strongest. I would say that in Polish public media, 7 years ago, I was present there twice, 3 times a week, like in any private channel. From then on, when Kaczynski got into power, I was one of the first person to be banned.
So similar to France. Were you officially banned, or did they just stop calling?
There is a clear list. I mean, the guys who were working in public TV told me, listen, you're on the list.
So why did they blackball you?
Because they want to have in the panel discussions, I mean panel, what I mean, like in the public TV discussions, they want to have 5 guys from one side and then one soft guy from the other side. And of course you have a discussion, you know, and when you're saying, listen, you represent government, your media are public media. That means public, we pay everybody for that, we should be everybody pluralistically represented. But they're saying, listen, you have so many private channels, okay? If we will not deal with public media the way we deal, your private channels will have majority. So we defend pluralism, okay? And of course you can say it's bullshit, I mean, but you know, if 60% of society would say it's not bullshit, then what do you want to do with this? You wanna say, but the God told you that, or like how will, you know, not everything is a question of political battle.
And manufacturing consent and weighting debates and weighting issues, these are ways to game the system.
And let, you know, I'm a very strong opponent of populism, and I'm perceived by Polish government or even Polish public TV as one of the strongest adversaries. By saying this, I have to say that there is something healthy in populism. Populism didn't start for no reason. Populism started because establishment, it's a class issue, okay? So like if, as Francois said, you have extremely rich people who control majority of media, okay, and who are saying we are liberals, okay? And by liberalism, they did not usually think that it's a question of political liberalism. Usually it was merged with economic liberalism. And economic liberalism meant strong inequalities, bigger and bigger inequalities. So, and that means more people were excluded from public media. If you live in a small town, even your newspapers like Le Monde will be not available in their small shops, etc. Okay, and so for these people, telling them, listen, freedom of speech, freedom of art, freedom of something. So that means freedom of something that they cannot even get in their small towns. Okay, so so we are telling to Polish society, like to Polish province, guys, liberalism, democracy is in danger. You should go to the streets. You should fight for it. And they're saying, listen, I'm thinking what to cook tomorrow, okay?
Yeah.
And if the ruling party is saying, well, you know, I mean, you can call us populists because we control public media, but at least we are giving you childcare support. At least we are distributing public money. Okay, so for these people, the choice is either equality and no poverty, or your liberalism.
Right.
Okay, and this is
and
why
you can't eat liberalism.
And yes, exactly. So this is why populists are winning. They are not winning because the world is bad. Okay, they are winning because liberals made many mistakes.
Right, and they make nice speeches, but they don't do a lot of groundwork that people want, that populists do.
So what I'm saying is that we should take a lesson,
right,
from not maybe populists, but why they emerged.
And the failure of liberalism that drives people into the hands of populists.
I'm sorry, telling you as a hardcore liberal.
Well, that's good. Good self-reflection. Listen, I've been informed by our colleagues we have about 4 to 5 minutes. People are hungry, and the program needs to keep on moving forward for the afternoon as well. We don't want to provide a roadblock or a traffic jam. So, François Burga and Bora Bayraktar will have your final contributions, and then we'll wrap it up. Go ahead, François.
Thank you. In fact, I've just been deprived of my very specific idea by my leftist neighbor. What he said in the beginning, I will have kindly disagreed. I think that there is indeed a difference between a fake news and a real one. But what he said at the end is exactly what I wanted to document. It's the fact that the ability of populists to mobilize, especially in the media, is in proportion with the failure of the institutionalized system. If I was a French citizen of Arabic ascent, North Africa, and I listened to, well, maybe you were not born, but I listened to the official covering of the crisis in Algeria during the 90s, I know that it is lies, full lies, one-sided understanding. I will desperately look for an alternative information. If I am, once again, a Muslim culture, Arabic belonging, I listen to the official coverage of the situation. Well, you know, President Macron 2 weeks ago, no one commented, has fully, clearly supported the move of Qais Said, which is, we call it a coup. He fully supported it in March of the Francophone summit in Djerba. Okay, if I follow the structure of the coverage of the Palestinian issue, you know, equating the violence of the Israelis with the Palestinians, ignoring the difference between dominating and dominated, I am going to desperately look for an alternative source of information. If we do not address this dimension of the issue of populism, we are going to fail in our reaction to control it.
Well put. Bora Bayraktar?
Yeah, I mean, I'll finish with my previous words. I think media is just a battlefield. So playing with fire is not what we do as journalists. The real questions must be addressed by the politicians and about this media situation in the world. I think now there are better chance for everyone to see what's going on, to get information about where the world is going. But it needs, as you said, it needs a lot of work. Everybody should be kind of expert to understand it.
You say playing with fire is not our job. Is putting out fire is part of our job? In keeping tensions down, in keeping people civil?
It's not our job. We just report, we just provide information. That's it. Medium between public and politicians.
Gentlemen, it's been a pleasure. It was a very philosophical discussion. I hope you all enjoyed it. I hope you all have a good lunch as well. Thank you very much for joining us and taking the time. Thanks so much.